Welcome to Make EdTech 100. I'm Lindy Hawk, educator, K-12 EdTech advisor, and your host. This is a podcast where we keep it real about what actually works in classrooms. No hype, no overwhelm, just practical strategies, honest stories, and tools that make a real difference for teachers and students. So come along with me on a journey to make EdTech 100. Today, I am welcoming Debbie Tannenbaum to the podcast. Debbie is an elementary school-based technology coach at Saratoga Elementary School in Fairfax County Public Schools in Virginia. She has over 26 years of teaching experience. She also shares her experience and knowledge with educators all over the world with her educational consulting business, Tannenbaum Tech, which is how we met. Debbie's motto is Pedagogy First, Technology Second. Her passion is helping educators move beyond one-off tool adoption toward meaningful, equity-driven integration. Welcome to the podcast, Debbie.
It's so great to be here.
Glad to have you. Tell me, what else do listeners need to know about you?
I think really that this year in particular, I've gotten really into looking at all of our learners in a much more inclusive lens. I've done a lot of really cool work this year with multilingual learners at our school and with students with disabilities, especially students with autism. I've gotten the chance this year to really take a lot of what I preach and use it to really meaningfully make change for those communities. And so that's one thing. Another thing is I'm really excited to be a Google Innovator this summer.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, you got in, you got accepted.
In fact, on the stuff that I did on EAC, on enhanced autism. And then the last thing is I have a new book coming out in 2024, so I'm very excited about that too.
Oh, wait, 2020.
I'm not 2024, 2027.
Oh, 2027. Okay, I was like, wait. I mean, I'm one to not even know what day of the week it is.
No, I have a book coming out in early 2027.
Exciting. Good stuff. What's the name of the book? Oh, with ISTE.
It's still to be determined. But right now we're in the editing process and it's really, really exciting. It's going to be really based on helping our elementary educators meet the needs of digital learners in today's society. And given what's been going on in the educational space, books like this are more important than ever because a lot of our educators don't really understand how to meaningfully integrate technology into instruction. And so this book will meet that need.
That's awesome. I love that, which is a big part of what I want to talk to you about and have you share today. Without sharing any confidential information, can you tell us a breakdown of your elementary school in terms of where your learners are at? Are you a higher socioeconomic, lower socioeconomic? How many multilingual learners do you have?
Absolutely. So my school is, I would consider high needs. We're not a Title I population, but about 50% of our population has some sort of, I would say, need. We have about 25% multilingual learners and about 25% students with disabilities. We also have a comprehensive service site, which is for students who have emotional disabilities, and we have an enhanced autism center. So we have quite a few programs. In addition, we're starting to do more with advanced academics. We have a very interesting school, and one of the cool things about that is it's given me an opportunity. I'm finishing up my 4th year there. It's given me the opportunity to really, we always say that what we do is really based on the people we serve. And I get the opportunity to really work with many different populations as part of my work. And this particular year, I was asked to kind of take the lead and help the specialists in my school really work on some work with multilingual learners, which was new to me. And I also had the opportunity to work on a project with our enhanced autism teachers. I'm really helping them to bridge the gap between where their students are at and making sure they can access literacy content at grade level.
That's great. You are a technology coach. Is that your official title?
No, my official title is a school-based technology specialist, SBITS.
Okay, a school-based technology specialist. I was a technology integration specialist, so very similar. Yes. A lot of people do not know what that means. Tell us, what does your day look like? What do you do?
Well, right now my day looks like watching the Pearson site. But that's not a typical day for
Is
me.
it
We're
because of
in the middle of
testing?
state testing.
Okay, yeah,
We're in the
yeah.
middle of state testing right now. We're finishing up our retakes, but
Okay.
I joke that the month of May is the month of Pearson. But in general, my days really look very different. Most of the days, I do some work where I'm working with our fourth graders as part of the master schedule. So I get a chance to like really try out lessons, see how my fourth graders respond to certain things. So that's part of my day. I also have part of my day where I get to go in, and it's my favorite part of my day, where I get to go in and co-teach with my teachers. This year, my principals really looked at my role almost like a UDL coach and Universal Design for Learning coach. And so what I've been doing is going into classrooms sometimes once a week, sometimes every other week, sometimes once a month. It depends on the needs in the classroom, and really showing teachers how to meaningfully integrate technology. We're modeling, we're co-teaching, we're trying things, and we're really seeing the impact of a lot of ways that we can use technology to provide universal design for learning. And that's really been a really cool thing for me. In addition to that, this year, like I mentioned, I got a chance to work with my enhanced autism teachers for 7 half-day sessions, really helping them bridge the gap from where their students are at with literacy to where they needed to be grade level wise, kind of helping with that accessibility. And then in addition to that, there's lots of other duties as assigned, as always. This year, I got the chance also to work in a mentoring group with some of the older students. And I also got a chance to do a lot of really great work with our pre-K kids. In fact, that was the joy of my day today. I hadn't seen them in 4 weeks. And I came in, they're like, Miss Debbie's here. And I was in the middle of a big dog pile of pre-K kids.
Love it.
And we've done a lot of really cool things with them. A lot of times people think kids that are that young can't use technology, and
Mm,
they've really put that myth to rest.
yes, I say that all the time. I'm like, do not underestimate the little guys, the littles.
No,
You have to do a lot of scaffolding, a lot more than the older kids, but don't underestimate them. If you scaffold it right, if you give them the opportunities, if you give them safe, secure tools, they can take and run with
yeah.
it.
And that's a lot of what my work has been really focused on, is how do we provide those scaffolds? A lot of times I talk about it now as being bumpers, like when you're bowling, but how do we provide them those scaffolds and those safeguards to make sure that they can do things, but they also are using inquiry skills. I just think it's so important. We live in an age where a lot of people are ready to say, we're going to not let our students do this at all. But if we take things away from our students, they don't know learn how to use them. And then we just make them more enticing. And so we really have to work in teaching our students and our learners how to use technology appropriately and when to use technology, because let's be honest, every single one of us as adults have our cell phones next to us at almost all times, and we manage to get work done. We have to teach our kids how to do the same things.
Yep. I love that you framed and you said your principals when thinking of your job, not as a technology specialist necessarily, but as like a UDL coach. I know a lot of
Yeah,
schools are starting to morph the tech integration specialist or the TOSA that's tech oriented to just be an instructional coach, like under the umbrella
right,
of instructional coach, because technology is like air nowadays. It's another
right.
learning tool if used correctly. And it doesn't mean that we're just shoving tools down teachers and students'
No,
throats. A lot of
and I
it
think
is,
that,
I know I do a lot of UDL. I know we align on that. We
right.
both do a lot of
Yeah,
UDL.
absolutely.
And technology is an amazing tool to help meet UDL. Honestly, I can't imagine trying to fully actually do all three categories of UDL without technology.
Absolutely. And one of the things I'm wearing my ISTE Certified Educator shirt, which is now kind of vintage because it's going to be called the ISTE plus
Yeah.
ASCD EdTech Leader certification. But when did that in 2023, one of the things that really struck me, I've been talking about UDL for a long time, way longer than I want to share here because it will make me feel really old. When I did my ISTE certification, all of a sudden using technology just made sense because of the ways it provided UDL. And I think about our students, and I always tell this story. And now he's in fourth grade, which is crazy. 3 years ago, I was in a first grade classroom doing a math activity, and there was this little boy and multilingual learner who did not want to do any math at all. But when I gave him the opportunity to share his thinking on a video, totally different kid. And if we only ever provide our students with a text option, we would never see that. We want to make sure we give our kids different options. And I think I see so much going on in schools today where kids are being taught from scripts and kids are doing cookie cutter assignments. And I really think that we need to focus on how to help our kids think and share their thinking. And technology offers us a lot of really great options to do that.
Since we're on the topic, we're both UDL people. You mentioned that kind of one of your passion areas is leveraging AI to help reach UDL, which AI is a type of technology.
Right.
That's something that I also really focus on. So selfishly, I would love to know what approach you take and how does technology, but specifically AI, because that's the hot button topic of the moment, fit into or support the UDL framework at your school?
Well, I think it's really important that a lot of times UDL, when we think about it, seems so big. And so one of the things that I've done with my teachers is we've really leaned into the idea of using GEMs, using those specialized Gemini, I guess, prompts to really make sure we're meeting the needs of our kids. I know different people feel different ways about putting student data in, but I've created GEMs with my teachers where I share it with them and we're able to put lessons from our curriculum in and say, we want to make sure we're including GLAD strategies for our multilingual learners. We want to make sure that we're using UDL and take a lesson that's part of our curriculum and say, modify this to meet our students' needs. That's just one of the ways I've been doing it. And knowing that by doing that, I can see exactly those things. We've also done things with our teachers where we've given them a lesson and just making a very basic UDL audit. Just ask them to use a UDL audit gem just to see what's there. For a lot of our teachers, when it comes to independent, they're just ready to identify. For some of our teachers, they're ready to go to that next step and say, okay, what am I going to do next? A lot of the work that our district's done with UDL has been more theoretical. I really focus on the practical aspects of UDL. So if I'm doing something with my teachers and they're looking and they're like, oh, well, my students are able to share their thinking in these 3 ways. Well, that's providing universal design for learning, or they're able to learn about something in different formats. Really making sure that it's not just one way for them. It's just been important. The really exciting work we've been doing this year is with our enhanced autism teachers. We got a chance to make a literacy morning meeting, which I had never heard of. We take a morning meeting and infuse literacy in it, and we use GEMs for that, where it created slides for our teachers, kind of giving them a partially completed slide deck that they could start with. I mean, if you've ever done responsive classroom, coming up with the sharing prompt every day can be a real challenge, and this was able to leverage some of that. So we've really been trying to figure out what can we embed inside of Gemini or our GEMs, because that's our language model that we tend to use the most in order to help our teachers to better meet the needs of our kids. None of our kids are using AI in our school except for maybe like an Adobe Express, which I know you and I both love. A lot of this is how do we teach using AI. And I know there's people have different opinions, but almost like a thought partner to help you think differently, because many times in this type of role, you don't have somebody else to bounce ideas off of. And it's amazing to me using some of these things, like I'll look at this and I'll be like, well, this is almost exactly what I want. What haven't I used? What haven't I given the, Gemini in order to get what I need? Really being intentional with that, I think, has been super important. It's been really neat to see all of our teachers like, oh, now I'm seeing why we're using UDL versus, this is another training we have to do.
Like another mandate, another initiative. No, that's super smart. That's not something I've done with my work with UDL. I haven't thought about going in and auditing a lesson or something from your curriculum and having AI pick it out and go, hey, you could make this little tweak to align to UDL or add this element or turn this into this. That's
Absolutely.
Really smart.
And one of the things I've really noticed that's been super helpful is, we've been doing a lot of work with multilingual learners. Sometimes even just coming up with sentence stems or sentence frames has been super helpful. I mean, our goal is if we can use the AI to help us do some of that planning, obviously with the human oversight at all points, then we have more time for connection with our students. And that's obviously the most important point. And I can't tell you in the work I've been doing with the enhanced autism teachers enough how many of them were like, I connected with my students in a different way than I had ever connected before.
Mm.
So
And
many
that's
times
from specifically having the AI help them come up with prompts, discussion prompts,
well,
or more
especially
than that.
what we saw, it was like a three-phase project. The first phase was really focusing on that literacy morning meeting, adding in vocabulary, adding in questioning so they could build their background knowledge. And then in the second part, we really focused on how to build that access bridge. A lot of the stuff that's in the curriculum, it's on grade level. It's not even accessible for all of our gen ed kids, our kids in our base side. Helping them to better understand. One of the ones we created was called a scaffolding gem, where we put in the lesson and then it gave us, okay, here's the big idea. Here's some questions you can ask. Here's ways that you can engage your students who are verbal and your students who are using their augmented device, their AAC devices, and really bringing the lesson to where they needed to be. Because so many times, at least we use benchmark at our school and our district, there'd be a little thing on the corner saying, this is what you do with students with disabilities. And our students need more than just a little corner. They really need lessons planned with them in mind so that they can access the curriculum. They deserve it as much as any other student. And in general, in the ed tech world, when we think about students with disabilities, we think about just assistive technology. We don't always think about how we can use technology to bring in that inclusive, accessible environment. And that's what my Google Innovator project's going to, start to address, is how can we help these teachers who have multi-age, multi-track classrooms, and it's a really heavy load. There has to be a better way.
Yeah.
I don't know what it is yet, but there has to be a better way.
So to make sure I'm understanding right, your teachers are leveraging AI to help them maybe find holes in the curriculum to align better to UDL, as well as helping them figure out how to provide better access, better discussion prompts, etc. So it's accelerating that very short instructional planning time that teachers have. Yeah. It's usually less than an hour a day to help them dig deeper. Yeah, if you're lucky. Yeah, that's right. If you're lucky.
That's assuming there's no behavior issues, that there's nothing else going on, an hour's generous.
Yeah, don't have kids in your classroom during your prep period or whatever it is.
In today's day and age, where I think it's never been harder to be an educator, especially a classroom teacher, I think the only way that we're going to be able to retain more teachers is by really leveraging a lot of these things. And that doesn't mean they're doing the thinking for the teachers. When I work with AI, and I know you and I both do a lot of work, I just recently started playing around with Claude as far as how to use that. I actually think deeper, because it really makes me think over every angle and really making sure that what I'm sharing is really my thoughts.
Agreed.
And I believe that the work that I'm doing now, using AI as a guide, as an assistant, or whatever you want to call it, my work's better now than it's ever been, because there was so many times where I was like, is everything I'm doing aligning? And I just needed somebody to kind of check all my work and make sure there was alignment. And now I have someone to do that.
Yeah. On that note, AI has got a really bad rap. The media language around it is it's all horrible, it's all bad, everything's bad about it. The other thing that the media is pushing is this idea of screen time with kids, and specifically screen time in schools. And I'm doing a multi-episode series of this podcast on this topic of what do we need to question for screen time, what is good screen time, what's not good screen time, all of the things, like all of the things around this quote unquote screen time debate in schools. Yeah. You are based in an elementary school every single day. You're working with teachers, you're working with students. Is this conversation around screen time showing up in your school building or in your district or district?
Well, we recently just had a school board member actually propose to get rid of our devices in pre-K, K, and first grade, and that will be voted on next month.
Okay.
As far as our classrooms go, I think it really depends on where the teachers are coming from. I see many teachers using it really meaningfully, and then I see teachers who are like, there's so much assessment we have to do in the elementary school setting right now that they're putting kids in front of devices because it's the only way they can get all of their assessments done. Plus, at least in my district, students have certain amounts of time they have to go on our reading program and certain amounts they have to go on our math programs, our adaptive curriculum type things. So when it comes to me coming in and doing a lesson or a teacher coming in and doing a lesson, there are some teachers who are a little resistant, and I'm like, but you have to see what we're doing and how it's different. And really looking at, and whenever I do a lesson with kids, I'm always like, well, how did the technology help you? I'm really intentional about that because I never go into a classroom doing a lesson and I'm like, oh, well, we're just using technology for no reason. Like, I'm very intentional. If we're doing a lesson and like we're in first grade math, and I want to make sure that my kids are getting hands-on exposure to practicing with something, then maybe I'm going to use a pear deck because I can get every kid's voice in there, even the kids who don't raise their hand. So many classrooms I go in and like 3 kids raise their hand and they're the only kids whose voices are heard.
Yep. Pear
And
deck
so
and
something like that.
CurryPod. I'm using CurryPod. Pear deck, I've been using Pear deck for years. Nearpod, if your school is Nearpod, is very similar.
Yeah,
CurryPod is also, all three of those are amazing for getting all student voices
absolutely.
out.
And one of the things I spent a lot of time telling my teachers is that my goal is not for them to use 10 tech tools. If they have 3 to 5 tech tools that they're really using in a meaningful way, that to me is important. And
Yep.
like in the elementary setting, I know you've been to my sessions. I talk a lot about Wixie. Wixie is like one of my favorites because it enables you to do so many different things in one program. And if I teach my teachers how to use Wixie, they're going to be able to use it for almost every subject. They can use it from pre-K all the way to 5th grade. It really checks a lot of the boxes. And then my teachers feel a little bit less overwhelmed.
Yep.
But I'm never going to say to them, you have to do this, you have to do that. That's too much. The tools need to be approved by my district, and like my district pays for Wixie. And I really want to make sure that the students see what they're doing. It's so funny because if I go in and I do something other than the Wixie, they're like, are we doing something else? I'm like, yeah, we are.
We're very much aligned on that matter of, I say the same thing to teachers. I'm like, I want you to have like 5. And I'm not going to share tools with you that only do one teeny tiny little
No, of
thing.
course
I'm
not.
going to give you tools that check, like you said it exactly, that check a whole lot of boxes that are very versatile and can be used in
Absolutely.
multiple subject areas for multiple things, and really
Yeah,
focus on
absolutely.
that creation and not passive consumption of taking an assessment on a device type of thing.
Absolutely. And, so when I'm working with the kids, I'm really intentional with, and the teachers, I'm intentional with that. And like, I really think about what they're doing and how the tool we're using helps them. And, this year, because we focused so much on UDL, we did end up using Pear Deck quite a bit and we used Wixie quite a bit. But it wasn't like those were the only programs. Those just happened to be programs that we used a lot because they were so versatile and it gave our teachers and our students so many different ways of potentially using them. But to me, it's less about the tool, but what the tool lets us do or helps us to do.
I want you to walk us into a classroom in your building where a teacher is really using the devices that they have at their disposal for really deep, powerful learning with students. What does that look like? What does it feel like? What are students doing? What are students not doing?
One of the things that I think has been really cool, especially in our kindergarten classrooms, is that our teachers have really been doing a great job of using some of the tools like I'm going to say Wixie again, but Wixie has these things called talkies where it's an animated graphic using the kids' voices. Having our kids do things like practice counting, practice reading, doing a lot of things like that. So rather than the teacher having to sit with each kid, they're able to also have their students practice some of that oral fluency. I think has been a really, whether they're counting forwards, counting backwards, just a kind of a neat thing that
So they're
a lot
actually
of times
students are recording themselves. So
they're
they're
recording themselves counting, they're recording themselves, maybe, doing some initial reading, things like that. Like something simple like that can be really impactful. Some of our kids, as they learn about shapes, go around the room and take pictures with their iPads and then, put them on the right page. Like things like that where they're, almost like detectives in a way, where they're investigating the environment around them, I think is really, really powerful. It doesn't always have to be something big and fancy. So those are just a couple of examples. I think giving them those opportunities, it really makes a difference. And so that's just one example. One of my favorite examples that I actually was in a classroom for, I don't know about you, but I've gotten really into vibe coding lately.
same. I need to do a podcast episode on vibe coding.
I'm obsessed with vibe coding. So I
It's
vibe
so
coded in,
empowering. It's so
oh my
empowering.
God.
You're
So
like,
I
I can
did this
create
vibe.
anything.
It's so cool. So I did this vibe coding activity where basically I gave four different sets of data. Our students had to pick one of the data stories. Then they had to create their data table on their computer, that create their graph, and like they're side by side, and they could look at it like as a picture graph or as a bar graph. And then underneath it had like three questions where the kids had to answer based on the data. And then I had on the very bottom a sentence stems where they got to write a data story about the data they had just worked with. It was so awesome. And that's in second grade they're doing that. In our kindergarten classes, they actually went around using one of the things I vibe coded and collected data from each other. It was so cute. But like giving our kids experiences to try things like that, really, I mean, really innovative stuff. And I keep saying that I feel like if the education community really learned a lot more about vibe coding, imagine what we could do. It might not help the software companies, but imagine what we could do for our kids.
I loved your example of having students just count with the
Yeah,
microphone recording. I tell teachers that the microphone and the camera on your students' devices is the most powerful tool that you have.
absolutely.
And that math counting example, the simplest thing ever, but think about it. If you're a teacher and you've got 20, 30 kids in your class, it's important that kids count out loud. You don't have time to have every
Yeah,
kid in your class count to you. Some kids are too shy to count to other kids. So it
yeah,
helps the teacher. It gives the student as much practice as they need. And it empowers those shy kids that maybe aren't going to fully count or go as far as they could
yeah.
if they were doing it to another student in class because they're recording it. And there's really cool apps out there like Seesaw does a really amazing job of having activities like that we're just counting to 10 in pre-K or
Yeah.
kindergarten, right? And then being able to share that with the parents.
Absolutely. And I was also thinking about, I know you and I are both Adobe innovators, using something like the animate characters where if you toggle
Yes.
over, it's so funny because you'll see like walk into one of my classrooms, every kid will be sitting against the wall so there's no background noise and they'll
Yep.
be practicing. It's been really important for our multilingual learners as, I work with fourth graders, giving them that opportunity to practice speaking, to practice sharing their ideas and not worrying about somebody else's voice getting in the background. Because I remember back, you've been around long enough, the days of Flipgrid, where it was like, okay,
Yes.
nobody wanted anybody else's voices in the video, and it was so annoying. And with something like Adobe Express, now we don't have to worry about that.
Yeah, and if
So
you're not familiar with Adobe Express, it's free to schools, by the way, and it
yes,
has the most amazing background noise removal, is what Debbie's talking
it is
about,
so
feature.
cool.
It's so good. It takes out pretty much anything and everything other than the person that's talking into the microphone. So it makes it so that you don't have that classroom. That is always one of the things that I get pushed back with teachers is, I've got a tiny classroom of 20 to 30 kids in it.
Yeah,
We're trying to use tools like Adobe Express and Animate that's built into Adobe Express and Snorkel and Book Creator and all of the things where we're having them
yeah.
record, but they get, and the kids get frustrated when
They absolutely do. And so one of the things I do when I teach Adobe Express, no matter which classroom I'm in, I say to the students, okay, when I do this toggle, it's only going to pick up what's in front, it's only going to pick up what's going on behind, with the microphone. I'm going to turn my computer so it's not facing you. And I want you to make as much noise as possible as I speak. And we do that. And then I say, okay, watch. And then I let them listen to it's just my voice. They can't hear any
can't
of
hear
their
anything.
voices. And they all look at me like I'm a magician.
Yep.
But then giving them that opportunity to do the same thing, it's just so powerful. Like,
Yeah, they love it. Let me tell you some stories over the last 15 years. When I first started doing ed tech in particular, I was a tech integration specialist. This
mhm,
was during the time of the iPad. Schools were buying up iPads like crazy, putting iPad
yeah,
carts, and then they didn't know what to do with them. So I'd go into the classrooms in the schools and help them figure out, how to use them
yeah.
purposefully. And there was an app called Explain Everything. Do you
Oh,
remember
I
you
know
ever used
explain
Explain Everything? Yeah.
everything.
It still technically exists. It's
I
part
know.
Promethean bought it, but you have to have a license. to use it essentially. But
Yeah.
Snorkel, basically I use Snorkel is even better because anyway, but we won't go into that. So explain everything. There was another app called Show Me that was really similar to explain everything.
Yeah.
And I had teachers that used, and it wasn't just those two, but those are the two big ones that loved those tools, saw the
Or
power in
Chatterbox.
them. Chatterbox, yes, I used Chatterbox as well. Go Animate, that was another one that was like little like
So many
it was a
cool
little bit
ones,
like
yeah.
Adobe Animate, yeah. So anyway,
Yeah.
so these teachers, they saw the power in it, they loved it, but the problem was the background noise when recording, and the kids
Absolutely.
would get really frustrated. So I had teachers that literally collaborated together. I had a K1 teacher at one school and a high school teacher at another school that worked together to create a soundproof box. So the high school kids and she was a science teacher, so they did it as one of their science projects.
Oh, that's so cool.
Created a soundproof box that was easily recreated with like everyday materials and
wow,
created the
that's
whole
so
thing.
cool.
And then the K1 class that was in a totally different town actually built
That's so
it
cool.
in their classroom, and it had to be really small because it's a little teeny tiny little rural school just outside of Bozeman here, and it was a K1
Yeah.
combined class, the teeny tiniest little classroom. So yeah, so they had this little tiny little recording studio, and the kids would go in there and they'd bring their iPads in there and they'd record, and then they were done, they'd go out and the next one would go in, and yeah,
Oh,
it
that's
was
so
fantastic.
funny.
So, but that's a perfect example of just collaboration to solve a problem. But now with Adobe Express, their background removal, if you're using like Adobe Animate, they have a new comic, all sorts of Adobe Podcast.
There's all sorts of stuff.
Oh my gosh.
I joke that like the way I felt about Flip or Flipgrid in the day is how I feel about Adobe now.
Yeah, it's very
They've just done
powerful.
so many amazing ways of really supporting educators, and in a day and age where budgets are being cut and there's not enough money for anything, it's really nice to know that some companies still support educators and provide access free.
Yep, love it. And I have to say, the elephant in the room, I always get this question of, well, we use Canva. We don't need Adobe Express.
It's
Or
so
opposite, we use Adobe Express and we don't need Canva. I used to think that several years ago before I'd really dove into Adobe Express. I used to think like, oh, you just need one or the other. No, they're completely different.
they're so different.
They're so, even though they're kind of under the same, like, they're
Yeah.
not. They're completely different. They serve completely different purposes. I was just talking to an educational leader just the other day about, she was saying the same thing, like they have Canva, do they really need Adobe Express? I'm like, no, there is 100% room for both, and they really do completely different things. So
And it's so true. And like the students I work with in fourth grade, we start the year, we talk about Wixie, then we go to Book Creator, then we went to Adobe. Now we're finishing up with our Canva unit. I want them to have exposure to all those different tools because then they'll be able to pick the right tool for the right job. And we spend a lot of time talking about how the tools are alike, how they're similar. And, I think that's really important. That's hitting on those ISTE+ASCD standards, but it's also hitting that critical thinking because I was hoping we would have enough time to do passion projects this year and let them pick the tool of their choice. The calendar has not been my friend, but we just started Canva and they're getting to see how Canva's different than Adobe. I really think Adobe's done a lot of great stuff, especially with their classrooms and things like that. And it makes it a lot, I feel like Adobe is a little bit more accessible as a starting place because
I
then they can make
agree.
those connections to Canva.
Yep, especially with the little
So
guys. I would 100% do Adobe Express and like the Adobe Animate, those types of
yeah,
things,
yeah.
Adobe
And I
Podcast.
usually don't really do a lot with Adobe until like second grade. I try to stick with other tools before that just because of the reading. But even I did this year, I did some work with Adobe and anime characters in a first grade class, and they were awesome.
Changing gears a little bit, one of your
Okay.
specialties is leveraging technology to enhance math instruction. I was lucky and I got to go to your workshop on this topic at TCA conference this year. I
Yes,
learned a
you did.
ton. I am very open that math is my weakness, 100%, 100% my weakness. It's a tricky one in terms of figuring out how to integrate technology into it and actually in a purposeful way and not just in a let's create a paperless classroom way. So I want to do a segment with you I call Tech Check or Tech Rec. Okay.
Okay.
And so what you do is I'm going to give you, and listeners know that I surprise you with this. You don't know what this is going to be. So I'm going to give you
Yeah.
something and you're going to give me an honest take on whether you think it's a tech check or a tech wreck. Okay.
Okay.
All right.
Got it.
It is. And I would really want to hear your opinion on this.
Okay.
Math drill apps and websites, math drill tools and apps. Your reaction already answered the question.
Yeah. I mean, my feeling is that's a tech wreck. There is a certain benefit to having kids practice. I'm not going to say that there isn't, but I really believe that our kids need to have a conceptual understanding of math and versus having them memorize facts. And I know we probably memorized facts when we were in school because that was just the way things were done. But really giving our kids a chance to, whether it's playing with online manipulatives or models, so much better for them. Really letting them look at those patterns. One of the things I've been talking a lot more about recently, probably since TCEA, is the whole idea of computational thinking and really looking at that computational thinking and how that relates to the math. And like, looking at playing with numbers, seeing the pattern, seeing what's going on, seeing how they can look at how numbers relate to each other, figuring out why an algorithm works. All of those things are really important. And in a day and age where so much can be done through technology, there's so much that can be done to show processes, show thinking through technology. And I think that that's so important that we give our kids that. And that doesn't mean that they can't practice, but I just don't think practicing on a drill and kill, even using that name, I think is automatically biased. But giving them that opportunity, there's so much that the kids can do on a computer using some of these virtual manipulatives where they get the chance to just play with math. I don't know if you've been on FET's website,
Yes,
but
the
FET
PET simulations.
Fed has recently added all of this really great stuff for elementary. And when I start a Fed activity with my kids, with my students, I always give them the first 5 minutes or so just to play with the numbers. Like, I don't even say to them, here's what we're doing. I said, here's 5 minutes, play with this tool. And then ask them what they notice and wonder. And I have to be honest, they come up with more connections there than anywhere else. And then I had a student who was like, well, I realized when I put the 10 ones together, automatically it clicked and it made a 10. And like having a kid make that connection versus me telling them that is really powerful.
So on that note, by the way, I'm writing down a list of all of these tools that we're talking about, and we'll put them in the show notes if you're wondering. Like PHET is PHET, PHET simulation.
Yes.
So we'll put a link to that in the show notes. Would you walk us through a specific example of how technology has enhanced math learning?
There's just so many ways that it's done that.
We already did the counting example. That's great.
We did the counting example, but
Yeah.
I even think about some of, our online manipulatives that we're able to have our students use. My students were doing an activity and, I'm going to mention Wixie again, but Wixie has this ability to clone, and my kids were practicing counting by twos. Well, they were able to use that cloning feature to help them practice, and then they could even use the microphone to then help them do that. That's just one example. Giving our kids the ability to say how they solved a problem. So many times our students don't know how they did it, how they solved a problem, and giving them the opportunity to break that down. For a lot of my students, we do all of our notice and wonders using technology where they're sharing what they noticed, what they wondered. We put those sentence stems in. Everything is able to be read aloud if they need it. So just, helping them to see how multiplication works, how do fractions work. All of those things are really powerful. I was working in a fourth grade class and we were doing improper fractions and it was like 17/12. And I'm like, how many holes is that? And they're like, they weren't really sure. Well, we can use an online tool to model that. And then all of a sudden they're able to see, oh, wait, 12 makes a hole. Then I have 5 extra. And all of those pieces, they're 12s. Or, like sometimes that visualization just isn't there for our students. And I don't know about you, but I can't draw nines equally no matter what I do.
So speaking of, we talked about vibe coding, and now we're talking about math and making math visual and how technology can support that. I vibe coded using Canva AI, a website that's like virtual manipulative blocks. And I made
Oh,
it
that's so
for
cool.
a training I was doing with, it was elementary teachers. I don't remember if I did it for the K to 2 grade band or the 3 to 5 grade band. I can't remember exactly which group I made it for,
Uh-huh.
but I think it was the K5. It was actually pre-K to 2, excuse me, group.
Okay.
And one of the teachers said, "I'm literally going to use this tomorrow."
That's
And
awesome. I mean,
it took me 5 minutes. I literally vibe coded it in 5 minutes. And it, like you're saying with the duplicates, it allowed you could click the
yeah,
ones, the
absolutely.
tens, and it would duplicate for you. And then you could hit a random shuffle number, it would give a new
Yep.
number. Yeah. I'll put a
I've
link
been
to
doing
that in the chat or in the show
I
notes
do
too.
a lot. I'll be honest, I like to do a lot of my vibe coding with Gemini and putting it into Google Sites. Sometimes I find with Canva, I have trouble adjusting it once I've gone through it. And I like that flexibility a little bit more. But it's been amazing. I mean, I know it's not math related, but my pre-K kids went on a field trip to a park. I was able to go on that park's website, find out the animals were there, and create a virtual field trip for them to go on based on that with vibe coding.
Love
It's
it.
just amazing. And what our kids can do, and a lot of times people are like, well, isn't that consumption? Well, my students, while they're doing these things, are always doing some sort of creation. Today, my pre-K kids were taking recyclable materials and creating art with them and sorting and looking at things, you just have to look at things a little bit differently. So,
Yeah. So I'm hearing, and what I see, I would say the most use of tech, especially tech with math, is those drill apps. Drill and kill. I mean, that's what they're called, drill and kill for a reason. You're telling
yeah.
me that there is way more that we can do
App,
with
and I
technology and
think
math.
yeah, and another great example. It used to be called Desmos. Now it's Amplify. I'm super excited. I get
You
to go
taught me
and
that.
learn. Yes,
You taught me
but
that at TCA. I didn't know that.
yeah, but Amplify has like virtual manipulatives on there. They have activities where kids can actually share and see each other's work, where teachers can give feedback. I joke that if I had had some of those tools when I was in the classroom, every time I was pulling a math small group, I would have had that in the back checking in with my kids. It's like Pear Deck or Nearpod, but it's free, at least the ones that are part of their Desmos classroom. Just giving our kids different ways and of sharing information. And another way besides that, and I think I showed this to you at TCA, they have these things called polygraphs. And what a polygraph is, it's a grid of 16 pictures and then the students have to ask questions using math discourse to figure out which one it is. And boy, is that powerful. I love the way that they get to, and they can do it with the teacher. Sometimes I'll have my student act as the teacher and pick one and answer the questions, or they can play against each other.
Love it. I'm adding Amplify to my list here. So many great tools we're talking about. So I want to ask you, if you're a teacher listening and you're like, oh, you're right. Like I am mostly using tech for, especially for math, for those drill type apps. Or maybe you're a school leader
Mhm.
listening and that's the type of tech use that you're seeing in the classrooms in your school. What
Mhm.
is one thing they can do to start moving to a more powerful use of tech to make math visual? Where do they start? What's the first move?
Well, if they want to make math more visual, really thinking about a program that has those options. Wixie has all math manipulatives in their image library. Book Creator has created some pretty good ones. They're more stacked images. Amplify, which is used to be Desmos, is a great example of that. PhET is honestly, if you just want to have your kids play with numbers, PhET is the easiest place to start. It's free. There's no login, and it's amazing what your kids can do. I mean, we had kids playing, in kindergarten, like the first couple of weeks of school, just playing with numbers under 10. And then some of them were like, wait a minute, I can do numbers that are bigger than this. And just playing and seeing the relationship between numbers can be a really powerful thing. I think a lot of times, I was asking a student, I'm like, what's 8 - 6? And they went and they said it's 3. And I'm like, okay, if you understand the relationship between numbers, that's not a question. Like you can visually see the 6 and the 8 in your mind, but that comes from experience. It doesn't come from a drill and kill.
So you mentioned that you have a school board member at your district, and you're a pretty large district. How big is
Yes,
your
we are
district?
189,000 kids.
Wow, okay, that's big. That's bigger, I think, than like any. I think Montana, we're the fourth largest state, and we have, I think, around like 200,000 students in the whole state. So your
Wow.
district, I think, don't totally quote me on that, but I'm pretty sure that's about right. Like we have around 200. So your district is like the size of every district in Montana. That's a big
Wow,
district.
that's kind of crazy to think about.
Yeah, big. That's a huge district in terms of Montana perspectives. You
Yeah.
have a school board member who is wanting to pull back devices from pre-K, K, and one, you said?
Uh-huh. And then have limits two through fifth yeah.
Oh, and okay. And so limits being like the number of minutes students can be on a
Right.
device.
Yeah. And I really think, and the conversation, and I know you and I are on a lot of the same social media platforms, it's not about screen time, it's about screen value.
Yes.
And I really wished, like, I was talking to one of my teachers today, and she was like, well, the kids are addicted to these devices. Well, let's think about how they're using the devices. We have to really think about that use and be intentional, at least in the elementary schools here during COVID. They just threw devices at everybody. They never really gave us who were tech coaches the opportunity to train people. And when we said we need time to train people, they were like, well, we're going to do science of reading and we're going to do a new this and a new that. And we've just never had the time to do that. We never had the time to really talk about what's blended learning. How can technology amplify learning? What is an appropriate use of technology versus not an appropriate use of technology? You know, and because of that, I think the conversations are more reactive versus really understanding. Like, this school board member had also said that she wanted like a certain digital literacy understanding for teachers. Now, I support that. Teachers need to understand that, but it's not, I feel like it's the same conversation with the cell phones. We can choose to teach every kid how to use their cell phone, or we can take them away and then they'll never learn. And it's the same thing with the technology. We have to set up those limits. We've got to put those guardrails in place. We've got to teach kids how to do this, because if we don't do that, they're not going to know. And we're in trouble if, I was thinking about all of our second graders, and if this was the first time they had ever used a device and they were logging in with their username and their password and all the testing that they need to take and all the things that they need to do, yes, I see some benefit, but like if you're a second grader and the first time you've used a device for creation versus consumption is when you start second grade, there's so many opportunities that have been missed.
I want to make sure I get your thoughts on if this policy that the school board member has proposed moves forward, or say like the state of Virginia were to pass some legislation that has limits on the number of minutes of tech use or screen time or anything like that. You've given us so many amazing examples of how you're using tech all the way from pre-K up to 5. What would be the effects on the students in your school if that policy passes?
I think there's going to be huge effects. I think about, especially under that UDL lens, I think about the days when it used to be, well, these kids had read aloud and they had headphones, and it was really made them stand out to have those headphones. Or our kids who might need something read to them. Now everybody has that, tier 1 instruction has that accessibility. Nobody stands out. And we're supposed to be, our school district is doing an inclusion pilot. We're supposed to be welcoming everyone in. When all of a sudden we put essentially, you have headphones, because you have an IEP, or you have this because you have this, I feel like it goes against a lot of that. And like in this policy, the school board member is like, well, kids who have IEPs can still use it, but it singles them out.
It creates a stigma.
I'm hoping that it doesn't go through. I'm hoping that when they vote on it at the school board meeting, I'll have a chance to share my thoughts. But unfortunately, I don't think a lot of parents understand the impact it can have. And that was one thing that I did get a chance to do this year. I tried to do some more parent programming, but it's hard to get parents to go to events at night.
Yep.
Parents are tired, teachers are tired.
So this came up, I think, in another podcast. I know I had a conversation with some educators about it, with some school personnel, and then I think I mentioned it in another podcast. So may or may not, depending on which podcast you've listened to, but one strategy, I've been talking to school personnel that are having the same experience of like we are offering parent classes and nobody's showing up. Short form video. Catch them in the scroll.
Yeah, that's a great idea.
Catch them in their social media. Yep. I'm a bit that one of my big things this year that I'm focusing on is this idea of catching people in the scroll and for both parents, teachers, and students. And some people are like, I think I did it. I think I have an episode I dug into this where we talk about like
Okay, no, that's a
explicitly
great idea.
teaching. Yeah, because the other thing it's doing is it's teaching them proper use. You're
Yeah,
modeling proper use, and that you can actually use platforms like Instagram Reels and Facebook Reels and TikTok and YouTube Shorts to learn something really powerful, you know? And
absolutely. Yeah,
so, yeah, anyway, just an idea to
great
throw to
idea.
you there. But yeah, parent education is everything. And it's not just parents, I would say community education, because
Absolutely.
a lot of what's coming out, a lot of the voices that are coming out right now on this screen time debate are community members that read the book The
Yeah,
Anxious Generation and, you know, are now
yeah.
dead set that all technology is horrible and all screen time is horrible. We got to pull it out. So schools, public schools, you're a public service. I say this all the time. You have to educate the community and parents.
And, when it happened in LA, I was like, oh, it just happened in LA. But like, there's a district near me that, has instituted this policy. Our district is now talking, it's no
Yep.
longer far away anymore.
No.
And when I went into this pre-K class and the things that they've been able to do this year, it's magical. We have kids who are 3 and 4 years old who are creating using technology.
If you are a teacher, an educator, an administrator, you're listening to this and you're still not sold, you're still skeptical of technology. I'm getting a lot of these comments on my TikTok videos that I've been posting of this podcast series, by the way. For some reason, TikTok is the place where I'm getting lots and lots
Wow.
of pushback from educators saying, nope,
Wow.
nope, we just need to we got to get rid of the devices. I'm going back to pen and paper. It's better than ever,
How is that better than ever? I'm just curious what they're saying.
Go read a lot. Go to my TikTok and read some
I
of
am
the
not a
comments.
TikTok person. Maybe I'm gonna have to go back and look. But I was talking to somebody and I can't remember who it was, and they were like, well, I don't want to use technology anymore because I don't want to have to monitor all of my kids on their Google Docs. And we're like, so what are they doing on paper? Are you just sitting at your desk? Paper can be used, nefariously, just like a piece of technology could. Like, it's about good teaching. And like, I think that like my daughter had an IEP and she needed to use word processing software to write. Well, when she was in high school and AI was coming out, they said no more writing papers on computers. She couldn't do it without. We had to have an IEP addendum so she could use what she needed. And then, you're talking about that, not letting kids stand out, like, and then she's the one using the computer. Like, these technologies exist for a reason.
That's the problem with the whole, but the kids with IEPs that need it can still use it. You know how many kids need that access but don't have an IEP or a 504 plan?
We've been doing a lot of work in our school with Read and Write with Google, and we had kids who weren't even able to write a sentence who are now writing multi-sentence paragraphs. And it's because of the technology. It's because they can listen to it, read to them. They can, some of our kids who do have the word prediction, they're getting the chance to really build their writing skills. And I just don't think there's enough conversation about that, of how these tools can really help our kids write better. And, I think about
and it's not the only, I think we need to specify that it doesn't mean that they're not handwriting. It doesn't mean that they're not learning to handwrite or not using a pen and paper. It's just another medium, and it's another necessary medium that they have to learn to interact in society.
So like, as you're talking, I'm thinking about you. I'm wearing contacts, you wear glasses. So we both have poor eyesight, essentially, right?
Very poor on this end.
So now there's all this talk about these glasses that will give answers, right?
Like the Meta Ray-Bans.
Yeah. So what if one day they're like, well, nobody can wear glasses because what if they're getting answers? And then the two of us are sitting there blind.
Yeah. And I can't wear contacts. I have to wear glasses, and I can't function without my glasses, like period, can't function. So,
right. And I think about things like that, like part of the awesomeness of having that technology is it gives our kids access to so many tools. And if we're going to say every kid has to use a hammer for every assignment, some of our kids aren't going to be able to do that. And do we really want to have more kids represented in IEPs just because of this.
If you are a teacher listening and you're like, all right, I am evaluating my use of technology, my screen time that I'm giving students, and I want to really move from more passive use to more purposeful, powerful, creation based, put the student in the driver's seat type use, what would be the one thing you tell them to do first?
Really look at why you're using the technology. One of the things that's going to be coming out of my new book is I talk about my 5 C's of communicating ideas. And when I think about technology, I think about that a lot. Are we making sure the tools we're using are easy? So the tools, I call it clickability or clickable, so the kids don't have problems using it. Are they providing choice, building in that UDL? Are the tools we're using enabling our students to collaborate and learn from each other? Are the tools we're using helping our students to curate information? We live in a world with so much information. And then the last part, is it connecting them to their communities? Is it connecting them to the greater world? If you're hitting those 5 C's, you're using technology in a really meaningful way. But if you're using it because you just want kids to practice, then you're not hitting any of
I
them.
love that. I have to admit that a small piece of me dies inside when I share really amazing technologies with teachers. And this happens all the time, by the way. All the time this happens. And a small piece of me dies that I share this really amazing, powerful tool. And I'm sorry if you're a teacher listening to this and you've said this to me. It's okay. It's okay that a little piece of me died inside. That then we always reflect on, okay, how would you use this in your classroom? Share out. And the share out is, oh, I would have the students that get done with their work early use this. Yeah, it killed us. You just heard Debbie's response. Like a little bit of us dies of like, what, we just showed you this really amazing, like you could do these amazing things. And
It shouldn't be for our early finishers. It's for
no,
every kid. Every kid deserves to have meaningful instruction that challenges them and lets them be a creator. It's not just for the kids who finish early.
yes. And so that's another thing to evaluate in your use. If you're looking at your use and
Yeah.
going, students are really only consuming, not creating, they're using it more passively, they're more of like the passenger, not the driver. Or if you're
Right.
only using it as a reward, you're only using drill apps, you're only using it for early finishers, then you probably are questioning screen time and thinking that it's a good idea to
Yeah.
pull back on technology because you're not going deep. You're not getting the full
Yeah.
power of that technology use out of it. So just something to think about. It's time to wrap up already. Can't believe it. So tell us,
Yeah.
how can listeners connect with you?
Well, I try to make it really easy. It's Tannenbaum Tech. That's my website. It's also my Twitter I guess my X handle, my LinkedIn handle, my Instagram handle. I also have a Facebook page for it. And if you're interested in learning a little bit more about the vibe coding, I now have a website, I guess I'm going to call it, where I'm starting to share some of the vibe coding stuff I'm doing. I'm starting to play with the idea of doing the vibe coding and also adding in my 5 C's together to see how it can all work together. So I've been doing some stuff with that, but definitely reach out to me. My email's debbie@tannenbaumtech.com. And my goal is that I don't want this to be hard for educators. It's about small, simple steps that make a big difference. And sometimes it's the smallest things that really, like I said, the kids counting made such a huge impact. And that's something that I feel like almost anybody could have their students do.
I'm glad that you said it's about the small little things because I think oftentimes teachers think, especially when I come in their school, and I'm like, hey, I'm
Yeah.
sharing new stuff with it. They think that they're going to have to completely redo their curriculum or spend hours.
No, yeah.
No, that's not the case at all. It's all about taking, like, we named, here, I got my list right here. Adobe Express, Canva, Wixie, Book Creator, Snorkel, Amplify. Taking one of those tools, Snorkel, Book Creator, are really Wixie, really great ones to start with, and integrating it into one piece of your curriculum. You're not completely redoing your curriculum. You're still using the base of your curriculum. You're still using your curriculum. You're just integrating those tools to, instead of having them do a worksheet to show what they learned about whatever topic, they're going to go create a book in Book Creator. And they're going to record themselves reading the book and they're going to add images, and they're going to add
Absolutely.
all the things, multimedia, and make it come to life. And then guess what? They can share that book with their parents and their grandparents and their aunts and their uncles and their siblings.
Yeah, and also look at something like that where you can just let your students play with numbers. And if you're not ready for your students, then definitely, I know there's a lot of people who are afraid of AI, but Gemini is a really safe thing to use. Just ask Gemini to help you customize your lessons. If you have students who are multilingual learners, say, I have 4 multilingual learners in my class and 2 students with disabilities. One of them has a writing goal. Help me customize this lesson to better meet their needs. Sometimes something as simple as that can have huge rewards. And yes, you could do all of that, but you don't have time to do everything. And that way you can look at what it comes out and say, oh, now I have another idea. Now I can do this. Now I can spend more time helping my students. It's all about making those choices. And I don't know about you, but if my choice is to work with kids or come up with sentence stems, I'm going to pick working with kids every day.
We end every episode with a Make EdTech 100 moment. And I realized we got to talking, and usually I have you share what Make EdTech 100 means to you at the beginning. Host fail. We got to talking and I skipped right over that, but it's okay. We can still do our Make EdTech 100 moment at the end to leave listeners with. So it's just something like the one takeaway that you want to leave listeners with, essentially.
I guess my EdTech 100 moment would be, think about why you're using the technology. And if you can share it with your students, then you're doing it right.
Love that. Great point to leave on. Thank you so much, Debbie, for your time and joining the podcast and sharing all the amazing things that you're doing and talking about the screen value. It's about screen value, not screen time. Appreciate it.
There's another 100%.
Another 100%. There we go. We'll leave it there. Thanks for joining Make EdTech 100. I know educator time is valuable, and I'm honored you choose to spend yours with me. For more EdTech strategies you can use tomorrow and ways to bring me to your school or event, head to lindyhawk.com. If this episode resonated, hit subscribe so you don't miss the next one. I'm Lindy Hawk. Go forth and make EdTech 100.